But so just as a reminder, with these connecting lines don't form part of your Enneagram type. So we've got that kind of figured out, at least a good starting point that you're a 4, wing 5, and with your social or one-on-one or self-preservation, one of those things. And those you could put on your name tag, like we did last week. But the connecting lines are not something that form part of your identity. It's just part of the dynamic of what it's like to be a 5 or a 4 or a 9 or whatever. And that's going to vary based on your environment, of course, and your stage of development. And I'm actually going to add something new to this. This is a little bit of a teaser. I'm going to add something new to this that that you're not going to get from every source that you read about the Enneagram. Most of them will say that the connecting lines are entirely environmental, entirely a part of your experience and how you react to various stimuli. But I'm going to make a case here that they are actually part of your development and part of your growing self-awareness too, throughout. Hopefully, as we grow as people and not go the other way, right? So just as a reminder, what we have here, and it's way less interesting when it's on a screen than when it's like on the floor in the middle of you, right? But as a reminder, we've got our triangle. This doesn't work at all. So it is. Between the 3, the 6, and the 9, and those are interesting because it's like a closed system in a way. You've just got these 3 that tend to reference each other in times of security or in times of stress. They'll kind of travel between each other. And then you have what they call the hexad, H-E-X-A-D, which is a much more interesting shape, going like this. Wait, did I do that right? Yes. So that connects the other 6 numbers. And you can see it much better in your handout on that page. You can kind of isolate it from the triangle to look at the 8, the 5, and the 7 on the left side, and they're going to have to go to the next one. And the 1, the 4, and the 2 on the right side, and then cutting across. So when I talk about, hello, good evening, just make yourself a name tag and grab a handout, please. So we're really dealing with the combination of nature and nurture here. And as I was saying before, the nature side is the side that usually gets emphasized when we talk about the connecting lines, because it's either the nature of stressful situations or the nature of more secure situations and how your personality tends to adapt in those scenarios. But there's also a nurture side to it, so that hopefully you can start to evolve in the direction of security and away from the direction of stress, and that you can choose how you respond. So, and as you do, you're going to start to see your personality evolve in those ways too. And as I've also said in previous classes, it's not going to evolve along a predetermined arrow, because you will see in a lot of resources, you'll see an arrow pointing toward, okay, well, in security, 4 is going to go to 2 or whatever. But for you, it might be the opposite. And so that's something really important just to discover in your own journey. So as we've learned about, and if you still have your handout or really any resource at all, just reading the profile of the different dominant types, you see positives and negatives, right? You see strengths and you see weaknesses. And so every single type has kind of the light side and the dark side, the things that make you awesome and the things that are challenges for you that you're trying to grow through. So in those times of stress, times of anxiety, then you will find yourself. So like I as a 3, when I'm stressed out, may go to a 6 but I'm not just going to be all that a 6 is, but specifically you could say to the dark side of the 6 in stress. We're going to talk about what some of those are soon. And again, for example, if I do that, then I would go to 9 in security, in moments where I'm feeling comfortable. But I would go to the light side of the 9, and I'd take on the positive, the peacemaker aspects of the 9. Whereas in stress, I may take on the fear aspects or the worry aspects of the 6. Now,
So do
yes.
all 3s go to loyalist for stress and peacemaker for security?
You'll hear some. I haven't paid a lot of attention to which is which because I don't really buy into that.
Okay.
But as you look in these various resources, and it's easy in any Google search to kind of find out, you will commonly find that it's one or the other, and that they try to generalize about that. But I think it's more important for you as who you are to decide and to think about, gosh, that was a really stressful day. I didn't feel like myself. Well, who did you feel like? What kind of character did you take on? When you had a really tight deadline, or when nothing worked. And then, but when everything's going really well, and you're just like, you also may not feel like yourself then either, and just kind of pay attention to that. So anyway, and I think it's important to see the light side, dark side thing too, because sometimes it can reinforce the notion that some numbers are undesirable. And since we don't have any 5s in the room, I'll just, some people can misidentify 5 as sort of a negative type of personality, which is completely untrue. So you say, well, I go to 5 in times of stress. That's fine, but we should say you go to the negative aspects of 5 in the time of stress. Where people may see a 9 as positive, because peacemaker is positive, of course, so I go to positive in times of security. That's fine, but go to 9. 9 has negative aspects too. So in the time of security, you're not going to those, you're going to the positive aspects. Are there more questions about that? That was a good question, John. Okay. So, I didn't ask you to write your types on your name tags this time, but you got them in your head. So, I would like everybody, if we can, to name, if we're talking about times of stress, what are some of the unhealthy aspects of your type? And I don't want to just go around the circle, but as you think of them, maybe say your type and just shout out. Yes. Colin.
This is really obvious to me, actually. I think I'm a 9.
As a 9, yeah.
And I think when times of stress, I become a loyalist. And I see that in becoming defensive, not only of myself, but of my team. And, well, this went wrong, but it could have been our fault because we're so great.
So you're naming a negative aspect of 6, defensiveness. And actually, that's not a bad idea. I like that. And you can say either or both if you want. Because if you mention one of the negative aspects of a 9, what you're doing is you're helping, especially 3s and 6s in the room, to think, oh, do I go there in times of stress? Right? So there you go. Well, what I've heard so far is defensiveness as a 6, but what's the negative aspect of a 9?
I think that as a 9, when I get stressed, sometimes I go into like duck and cover mode, and it's hard for me to have like the hard conversation to happen because I know it's gonna cause people to start yelling. I don't like getting yelled at.
Avoidant behavior, you could say?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, or hiding.
Like, I have a really good friend who's an 8, and she'll just like knock people over if that's what she thinks. And I'm jealous of her ability to not care when people yell at her. She's a colleague And yeah, I like to have her on my team when I have an unpopular opinion.
Well, thank you, and you helped me, because I mentioned where I can go as a 3. I'm more likely to go to 6 in stress, but I can go to that avoidant behavior as a 9 as well. And that if I start to feel insecure, if I start to feel like people are against me, or I'm on very thin ice or something like that, that's a stressful environment, then I can become avoidant. So, yeah, and I don't have that figured out for myself either, so that's something I'm working on. But I can identify that, partly thanks to Colin. So, anybody else?
I'm a 3, and when I get stressed out, my emotions snap very quickly, and I go to that place of anger a little bit, and I'll get frustrated a lot faster when I'm stressed. So, like, putting up that wall with I see.
Okay. So just clarify for me, are you describing a negative aspect of 3?
Yes, but I guess. Yeah, I think so. I'm saying that's a negative aspect of me that I see being with a 3 because it's, I read it somewhere.
Is frustration a good word for it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like quickly frustrated in times of stress.
And I like to be a little more specific, and I'm not writing all these down, but because anger, you get anger kind of around the circle.
Right.
And some other numbers are more known for anger than 3s are, but frustration certainly.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you have one that you went to that you wanted to call out as well?
Probably more than 6 in like times of stress. Just being the fear-based like you. If I get too stressed, if I am a little stressed, I get to the frustration. If I get too stressed, I kind of shut down out of fear and like close myself off.
Yeah. Yeah. Fear. And we named avoidant over here. Avoid.
I would say as a 1, in stress, I become very controlling because I'm trying to make everything do exactly what I need it to do. When I get to
Now again, to back up, we're talking about controlling
yeah,
is a negative aspect of 1.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
but when it gets like really stressful, I tend to go to a 4,
Mhm.
and it's no longer about trying to get to that end goal. It's not only these are the things we haven't done, but these are all the things we've done wrong. And this person has this done right, and more like self-critical toward yourself.
Hmm.
So kind of criticizing.
Yeah. Self-critical. It's a pretty easy place for 1 to go as well, because that's definitely that's an overlap between the 1s and the 4s. Yeah. I'm not going to make everybody do this actually, because for the sake of time, we'll switch to the times of strength, but I will try to get everybody to chime in before we're done. George.
As a 9, trying to keep everyone happy and peaceful, I don't have much energy left to make my spouse and children feel special.
Oh, okay. So that's a negative aspect of the 9 is, and I'm trying to think of a good descriptor for that. Of prioritizing or
My wife and children would wonder if there are priorities in my life.
right. And then, so when you are stressed out, do you tend to take on the negatives?
I go to both sides of 6 and become obsessed with worst case scenarios.
Catastrophizing, right? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's good. Maybe one more before we switch to times of strength.
I think one of my negatives of the 9 is putting on a lot of stuff
Yeah, it's different kinds of stubborn though, isn't it? A 9 stubbornness and an 8 stubbornness. I feel like an 8 there's more of a bullheadedness, and a 9 there's more of a, it's more of a, thank you, passive aggressive is that I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be pugnacious about it, but I'm also not moving, right? And stubbornness, I'm not going to call that a cardinal sin. That's it can be a weakness, but it can also be a strength. So, do you find yourself traveling across the circle in times of stress?
Probably to a 6.
Mm-hmm. For fear and catastrophizing and whatnot.
I'm not sure I've ever traveled to a 3.
Yeah. One thing I should have mentioned, to call myself out, praise seeking for a 3. If I was going to name, for me personally, if I was going to name the weakness in my dominant type. So on that note, did I mention I'm going to send an evaluation out to everybody after this class? Which is true. Some of you know that's true. But this seemed like the right moment to mention it. So, okay, let's talk about insecurity. I've called it times of strength sometimes, but insecurity, then we go to take on the healthy aspects. We, of course, we can soak up in our own positive aspects of our type, and we start to take on aspects of that type across the circle as well. So, so I think I mentioned for myself as a 3, I can take on that positive peacemaker aspect. And sometimes I can even start to let go of a little bit of the stranglehold on life that a 3 can have, and that I have to do all these things and I have to accomplish and everybody has to be happy with my work and all that. I can let go a little bit of that in order to create, to build the connections, to build relationships, to make peace, and to worry less about my own personal image or my personal reputation, and think more about the community, think more about the group. So when I am secure, and that's when I'm around people who I know believe in me, then I don't have to work so hard to prove myself, right? I feel it in this group right here. I was tied up in knots before the first week. I was stressed out for a week solid trying to get ready for that because I had no idea who you people would be. And I don't even blame myself for having stress because it is stressful. It's like I'm going to teach a class on something I really know nothing about to people I've never met. So that is stressful. But as the weeks have gone by, I sense that we have formed a type of community here. And I'm not coming in here like, oh man, I got to prove that I'm worthy to be up here doing this. And that's why last week was so fun for me, I think. It didn't go like I expected it would go. But we were able to create that sense of community just by sharing about ourselves across the circle. So to me, that's almost an example right there of a 3 traveling to a 9. So anybody who has not spoken up yet gets to be positive and call out a positive trait of your type, and then also a positive trait that you go to in times of security.
I'm 6. And I think one of the positive things about being a loyalist is like the sense of community that I seek. And then when I'm doing well, I really live into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one positive that I like. And another, I think, belongs to the 9. So I think I probably mentioned this before, but the cooking strength, the strengths finder, my top one is harmony. And so I do want, I like group community work, and I do want everyone to get along, and so it's balancing that, having the positive aspects of that.
Good. And you can see very, very well how those link up. The community, and of course, as a loyalist, community makes a lot of sense. And then as a peacemaker, harmony. But you're leaning more into the difficult community here, the community that needs to exist. This is like you're focused on the community you have, and up here you can make new community, right? Or where disharmony might have existed. When you are in a time of security and you feel supported, you can turn disharmony into harmony. Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Stephanie. Anyone else?
I guess I could, being a three like yourself,
Oh.
I certainly understand. I think we're all tied up in knots about getting ready for this lab. This is another notch in the belt, another achievement that we're trying to make happen. And I find myself in a similar situation when I decided to go after something. I often way overwork it. I'm a workaholic when I need to be. Can really stress myself out. I guess I tend towards peacemaker. I'm not sure. After that.
So the positive of the three is, you were naming a positive aspect of being a
Well, I
three.
think the positive aspect is I tend to set goals and work hard to achieve. I think that's a positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, goal oriented.
Until I learned what a three was, I didn't realize how many times I've done that. So it's been a little, make you think about it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, so so when people are moving towards three in times of security, they may find themselves more goal-oriented. When you are in a time of security, you go to 9, and what was the strength that you mentioned?
Well, I have to look at the 9. What I need to do is unload the anxiety I create for myself. And somehow I get into a mode of being a 9 and calm myself about what's coming up and try to make myself feel like, you can do this. Just keep doing it.
I like the word calm. That the 9s have a certain chill to them.
Either that or go crazy.
Yeah. Right, and we seek that out from around the circle sometimes, when we know that that's what we need. Or sometimes we just seek out a 9 to calm us down when we need that. But Connie, are you rolling your eyes? You seek out a 9, you don't have to seek far. Yeah, absolutely. All right, anyone else that hasn't chimed in yet?
So I'm at 4, and I think when I'm driving, I need for a 1. I also think, like as you mentioned, how sometimes different traits or attributes are more obvious in different settings, like at work, in a stable environment, their environment, if you will, at 5 years, I tend to show more attributes of a 1 than I do of a 4. So like my colleagues were surprised to hear that I was a 4. Like so surprised, one of them yelled, "You can't be a 4?"
Well, and what was the positive aspect of 4 then that you were mentioning?
Oh no, I was mentioning the positive aspects of the 1.
Which was what?
Perfectionist.
Oh,
one
that's your name. You can't use that.
I guess being open to order and organization and processes, and not necessarily chaos and this or free will.
You may be more of a 1 at heart than you think if you named perfectionist as being the strength of the 1. Or you just had the opportunity to develop that. You spend a lot of time at work, right? And not more than you should, but you spend a lot of time. So when you immerse in that, I'd be surprised if it doesn't have sort of a shifting effect to you, for you. And the nice thing about that shifting effect is that you're shifting into something that's healthy. And you don't have to leave the healthy behind either. And that's kind of what I was getting at last week too, with some of this looking across the circle, is that we're starting to meld, we're getting out of that box or that circle that we're sitting in, and starting to like spread ourselves out in ways that are, in cases like this, that are healthy, right? Anyone else? I feel like there's at least 2 people who haven't spoken yet.
Well, I'm a 7, I think,
7, okay.
and, a little bit of 1, a little bit of 2, and a little bit of, that's about it. I underline things. So, I mean, I have a little bit of, also I underline 6.
We can't get 2 7s to show up here at the same time, can we? That's so backwards. Anyway. But nobody's
These
mentioned
little
7.
lines, I don't really think I have any time.
Okay.
And
Well,
then-
can you name, what is a positive thing about being a 7?
Well, I'm just, let's see, what is the positive? Wide range of interests, upbeat and optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I am.
I'm going with happy. If I'm gonna kind of merge those together. So then, if your lines go to 1 or to 5, do you see, in a time of security, in a time of where you feel well supported, taking on some of those more like seeking order? And this is how we're helping each other out by naming these positive. Order is a positive aspect of being a 1. And 5s haven't come up, so a positive aspect of 5 is being knowledgeable.
In 6, detail oriented, and 1, intense ability to concentrate.
And you don't see that?
I have that.
Oh, concentration.
Right.
Right. So when you feel safe, when you feel supported, you can shift into that mode of deep concentration and investigation, right? As an investigator. I think that's a fascinating dynamic when you have these outgoing 7s. Because sometimes that extroversion is just a part of just who you are, and you can't avoid it, right? You're just out there all the time. But sometimes it's based in a need that, and even in a fear of isolation or a fear of loneliness or whatever. And so and 7s are good at it, and 7s can have fun with it, but that doesn't mean that's what a 7 wants all the time, right? And sometimes it's when a 7 is surrounded by other 7s, or an extrovert with other extroverts, or a talkative person around other talkative people. I'm talkative, as you can tell, but when I'm surrounded by talkative people, sometimes I can find a very peaceful place of listening, and I feel like, oh, I got a break, what do you know? Which is weird because I like talking.
Interesting you bring that up.
Okay.
I'm a pretty talkative person myself, but if I get in amongst a lot of other talkative people, I usually clam up.
Mhm.
She's kicking me saying, talk. I'm listening.
And what do you feel in that moment? Do you feel marginalized, or do you feel a sense of peace about that?
I usually feel a sense of peace. I feel interested in what they're saying.
Yeah.
I'm kind of worried that I'm not socializing.
So yeah, it's interesting to see those very personable people then become more inward. Not when they feel afraid, but when they feel supported, right?
I rarely ever get down in the dumps, but what I do is I'm really, and that hardly ever happens, I read the first chapter of John. I think that's the most comforting book. It's just beautiful.
Wow.
It's just neat.
Yeah, that's great. I'll have to try that.
It's so, it just puts everything in perspective.
It really does. Yeah. I feel like John should have been the first book of the New Testament. That's another topic, but I think you can believe everything you're supposed to believe about the Bible and still think that the book order of the books should be different. I don't think that's necessarily God ordained. Why not start both testaments with "in the beginning," right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, unless there's any more. Oh, yes, Charlie.
I'm a 9,
Yes.
and when I am feeling best about myself, I think I go to a 3, to the achiever.
Okay.
Energetic and productive, can be almost workaholic.
Although if you go, that's crossing the line into the dark side. If you're talking as a general rule, anything that ends with aholic, it's going to be a negative. You guys should write that down. That was really good.
We'll put it on the comment cards.
Nice.
That shows up in a service.
Right? But we got Bill over here naming goal-oriented as a positive of the 3s. So as a 9, you find yourself latching onto these goals more often and how would you describe a secure environment that would pull you in that direction? What is it that gives you that invitation to take on those characteristics?
I think it's when there's not a crisis that I'm trying to mediate.
When there's no unrest,
Right,
when there's not, when you don't have to be the peacemaker.
correct.
Which raises an interesting question. Are we mostly a peacemaker when the situation demands it? Are we mostly a perfectionist when the situation demands it? Maybe the life that we find ourselves in has convinced us that an investigator is what's called for here. This is a job for, the loyalists. Nobody's loyal. Everybody's disloyal. Everything's fracturing and falling apart. We need some loyalty around here, right? And that's just not a situational thing either. We could be talking about family dynamics and family systems, and that we were raised for certain attributes to be viewed as good and others to be viewed as bad. And so that's what the world needs now is more enthusiasm. So if I can lean into this, then people will approve of me. Or maybe more specifically, my family will approve of me. Because they were the first ones to instill that in me. And that's something we didn't get into a whole lot, and that's because the question has come up, can my Enneagram number change? And I think that little by little over time it can. And I think it is more ingrown than it is inborn. Because different cultures produce different balances of numbers depending on what is culturally valued, right? And some will say that, a capitalist society produces more 3s. I may have said this in week 1. Produces more 3s because achievement is, because we're not born with status. And it's like we are, if there was a caste system or a class system or something like that, there are no noble men and noble women here. Maybe we may have our equivalents, but we at least have this delusion of the open door, land of opportunity. You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and rags to riches and all that, right? That's 3 all the way. I'm saying you can do this if you work hard enough, if you set your goals and never go out.
One thing about, you mentioned culture. A few years ago, my children went to KU, 2 of them. And a freshman had to take a communications course. And I thought that was a great idea, because people don't know how to communicate. At least, I think a lot of them don't. So, I don't know where communication goes in there.
Well, it filters into a lot of different places depending on which kind of communication. Peacemaker is the first one that comes to mind. A very high level of communication is required to create empathy, and to bring different sides together to find that common ground. But no, you're right. And I feel like we're doing it right now. We're doing it in this class too, that we're learning a new language, a new way of communicating, so that we can bridge some of those divides. hopefully. So maybe this should be one of the required first-year classes at KU, right? All right, well, I wanted to dovetail from this into the levels of development, which we haven't really touched on at all. This is a bit of a new concept that you'll find in some resources: the unhealthy, the average, and the healthy. And this is the first time we're really talking about that we're really making value judgments. You know, even when we talk about negative and positive aspects of each type, we're not necessarily even talking about sin versus righteousness or crime versus lawfulness or whatever. There's not a value judgment to it. It's just aspects of being human, sort of a yin-yang aspect of being human. But with levels of development, we are talking about immaturity versus maturity and trying to sort of leave immaturity behind and become more mature in our own types. So, and I think that as we mature, as we move out of the unhealthy levels of development and toward the healthy ones, we will find ourselves more on the line of security and less on the line of strength, whichever one that is for us. So like if I've identified that as a 3, I become more like a 9 in times of security and more like a 6 in times of stress, well, if I'm growing as a person, then I'm hoping to see myself riding this line more often and riding this line less often. So,
Brian,
yes.
could another word be used in the sense of awareness? So depending on the situation that one finds himself in, then I as a 1, I'm called to be more of a 7, I'm called to be more of a helper, I'm called to be more of a whatever, depending on the situation. That means that I have to be self-aware enough to know my strengths and my limitations and sort of whatever the situation is that I find myself.
Yeah.
Is that sort of what you're talking about?
It is. It is. You're taking it even a step further, I think, by the more you learn about all the types, the more you learn to discern that in your environment. The more you can see that this situation might call for a 2. But it also, that self-awareness also requires you to be honest with yourself whether you can be that. You know, is it better? And it's kind of that much larger debate. What's better, authenticity or, I don't know what word to use. Fake, well, I'm more like custom solution, kind of, whether you can manufacture, you can curate yourself to be, and this is the threes all the way, have a huge problem with this. So, like, can I twist myself up into a pretzel to become the pretzel that this person needs, you know? And if I can, maybe I do, and maybe it solves the problem. But if I have betrayed myself in order to do it, then do we call that self-sacrificial? And Christianity really has to wrestle with this. We believe in self-sacrifice, obviously, in the example of Jesus. But does that mean sacrificing who you are, sacrificing your authenticity for the sake of another? Or is our own integrity more important than that? And it's not a question you can answer across the board. It's just something you have to bring with you to every situation, you know, and decide, can I cross that line? You know, and am I still true to myself, or does that matter? So, yeah, that's tricky, and we learn to be more flexible and not to be stuck in one little box. But to be infinitely flexible is probably not a virtue, is it?
Well, being a 1, maybe is my issue. So if I'm in a confrontational situation with someone, can I realize that about myself, and instead of responding in a 1 form, can I respond in something that would be more helpful in the situation? And I think that would be true of myself, because I'm aware of who I am and my own limitations at that point.
I think sometimes that comes down to that there's not just one solution to any relational problem, right? So it may occur to you, my sister-in-law is a 2, she would handle this so easily, or whatever, right? But as a 1, if you go to 7, for instance, I don't know if you do, in a time of security, and if you really learn to immerse yourself in that and lean into that, then even in a time of stress, you could find that in your toolbox of that connector that the 7 is. So maybe your sister-in-law, the 2, could step in and just assist the person in the way that's needed, but there's another way to do it. And it's something that you may have more access to. So it's learning that kind of flexibility, I think, may be part of it. And I'm hypothesizing. So just getting the juices flowing.
I think it's as important for us to learn about the other numbers as it is our own, because
Yes.
for me, like, I think it's less about saying, oh, I need to act like me, but saying, okay, I'm working with an 8. How can I meet them where they are? Not by changing what I do, but by considering where they're coming from. And what I found is it like exponentially increases the grace that I can give people. Because I'm like, okay, I understand you're approaching this from a very different place. And it's not personal, and I shouldn't take it personally.
Right.
You know, it's just like, you have a different motivation, and you're coming from a different type of fear. And so that's what I've found most helpful in my life, is to like, yes, my own self-awareness has been huge, but then also like applying that across the board to the other.
Yeah.
Very done.
Empathy is a great word for it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a certain former president, I don't have to say his name, who was famous for only reading something if it had his name in it. You can just guess who it is. But when we read materials on the Enneagram, I know if I brought some books here to show you guys before you leave or whatever. But, you know, if you have a book and it's got a chapter that's about you, I'm like, oh, this is the type 3 chapter. This one's all about me. I'm going to skip the other chapters and I'll just read that. Maybe I'll read it 2 or 3 times. I might see, read my wife as a 1, so I might read that chapter, or maybe my parents. But it's like, you really just want to hone in. It's like, tell me about myself, right? Even if it's uncomfortable. But if you get to that, like, well, I don't really know anybody who's an 8, so I'm just going to skip that chapter. But you said it exactly right, I think. And as you guys study more about the Enneagram, I would encourage you to read those other numbers and to forget which number you are in the process. To go back to that point of initial discovery and read that chapter about 8s, asking yourself, I wonder if I'm an 8. Because if you do, you will find some of yourself in there. Because every one of us, and we don't talk about this a lot, has bits and pieces of all 9 types in us. So if you read that chapter on 8s with an open mind, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, that's like me, and that's like me. And in the process, we'll learn that kind of flexibility and empathy.
It's interesting on the 9, but then the first booklets we got, we all went through them, and I put yes, no, on number 8, but yes, on all of them. So it just goes along.
But you're identifying as a 9. 9 wing 8, surely. Right. So you at least get a wing out of it. Yeah. A very strong wing. That's great. Well, before we move on to talking about the Bible characters here, I think we can abandon ship with this mess. You guys remember that? This is a very simple visual concept, but I still think it's worth drawing out. And that's when we talk about the id going from immature to mature, from unhealthy to average to healthy. All right, so if you've got, what color should we use? Call it let's say there's a spectrum here. And we'll call this your stressful. So these are stressful situations, or environments of stress. And environments of security. So unhealthy is this. If we're calling the colored in ones stress and the open ones security, this is feelings of stress even in an environment of security. Think paranoia is just one example. But so when we are unhealthy or when we are immature, we'll find all kinds of reasons to be stressed out when there's really nothing to be stressed out about. But the opposite of that, of course, and what we're hoping to move into, is the ability to feel secure, to feel strong, even in environments of stress. So this we can call unhealthy. Some of you find that sound stressful, I apologize. This we can call healthy. And then average would just be this. Or I'll just mix them in here. Average. So if your mood tends to match your situation, and you're in a secure environment, so you feel fine, and you're in a stressful environment, you feel stressed, congratulations, you're normal. You know, you're average. I mean, that's where where we naturally find ourselves. There are no problems necessarily, but wouldn't it be great if your mood or your emotion or your state did not depend on your environment? Because you may find yourself in a natural disaster or bankruptcy or divorce or loss or all kinds of things. And wouldn't it be great to maintain that sense of security and be able to grieve, be able to feel your feelings in those stressful times, but without losing that sense of integrity and security? And that's where I think the Bible speaks really well, because actually the Bible speaks well in a lot of things. But a few I wanted to call out specifically is Jesus in John 14 saying, "My peace I give to you, not as the world gives." The world gives this peace right here. That the world says, we're going to fix your situation for you. Almost every commercial you could ever see, look for it right here. If you feel like this, okay, you're over here, your life is stressful and therefore you're stressed. We're going to fix that for you so that you can be not stressed. We're going to change your situation because you buy this thing or you subscribe to this thing or you let us solve your problem for you. We'll change your environment and therefore we'll change your state and you will feel better. But Jesus is not promising this. Jesus is not promising to change your environment. Jesus is promising to give you this in the middle of whatever you might have to deal with. Another example, a narrative example, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Paul and Silas in prison. Way over here. Right? Very stressful. And yet, worship, prayer, peace, thankfulness even. The world can't do that for us. Or one more, Paul again, writing to the Philippians, "The peace that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." And we love that in the Episcopal liturgy. We use that a lot too. The peace that passes all understanding, the peace that doesn't make sense because what the heck is it doing over here? Peace doesn't belong over here. Right? But that's what we get. So that's my little entree to Scripture and the Enneagram. And if you would, please take out that handout. I'm trying to leave enough time to do this. And let's go back to breaking up into our type groups. So as long as we have at least 2 in a group, we can make it work. So who are the ones? We have 2 ones. You guys are a group. 2s. Are we all out of? Oh, 2. Okay, I'll put you with somebody else then. 3s. Okay, you guys are a group. 4s. 4 and 2 together. Okay. No 5s. 6s. 1 6. Okay, yeah. And 7. 1 7. So 6 and 7 get to be together. No 8s, and then 9s. 4. You guys are going to be 2 groups. So let's the 3 of you be a group, and the 2 of you be a group. Okay. And let's take 10 minutes. The first 5, and to have 2 separate discussions. The first 5 minutes, I want you to talk about the Bible characters that are in here for your type. And if you abjectly disagree with the character that's in there for your type, I put 2 in. I put a man and a woman in for each type. So decide, do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? Can you think of somebody better? So you can discuss that for 5 minutes. In the next 5 minutes, I want you to build a case. So it's almost like debate class. Resolved, Jesus is a type 3, which is what I would argue because I'm a type 3. So take your own number and figure out how to make a case that Jesus is the same Enneagram type as you. And if you like, feel free to take some snacks with you to the table, and we're going to take 10 total minutes to do that. And then we're going to come back and we're going to share what we learned.
I don't know if it's part of scripture.
Oh, yeah. I got off the
That's my favorite part. Find that cool.
Or no, it's ready. Yeah. If it helps, I'll tell you guys what I'll do in 5 minutes from now. You can make sure you're not going to run out of time. It'll take 5 more minutes. Okay, let's gather back. Keeps happening. Okay, and I want to be respectful of people's time. I know we've pretty much taken till 8 o'clock with these every time, but if you need to go, please feel free to go. But if you do need to go, I recommend you talk first, because I am going to ask a representative of each of the types to stand up and to build that case for Jesus being your type. Now, in, what was it, the 9s that we had in 2 separate groups? I'll have 2 different, I would like a representative from each of the groups in your case. But does anybody need to go in the next few minutes? Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with 1s. And did you guys decide on a spokesperson? Okay.
I might get right down what I said at the table a little bit much better.
Okay, I've just changed my mind. I'm not going to make you guys stand up. But I am going to make you speak up, because I want everybody to hear why Jesus is a 1.
Something that Suzanne said was another name for the 1. I saw a reformer today when I was looking for different Bible characters, but she found seeker. So, like, a really, really healthy 1 is able to look past the flaws and that the world is not so black and white. So, even the sinners can be pulled back into, like, the good side of things, and that good is always there. You look past the flaws, and you can keep bringing people into the fold and pushing yourself and people forward. So that was kind of what we came up with.
Like that. Is it attractional quality of unifying, maybe?
Yeah.
What I hear you saying? Okay.
Prioritizing and like less critical of people, more accepting.
And I think you instinctually went to the healthy 1. And I'm guessing we're all kind of assuming that Jesus is on the healthy side of the spectrum of whatever number we're making an argument for. That Jesus was way over here finding security in a very stressful situation, right? That he was mature, he was advanced in that sense. So, and here we have some advanced, some mature aspects of what it means to be a 1. So, thank you, Team 1. Team 2.
Okay, that would be the only 2. I would say going down the list that he was approachable and maybe kindness. Was a vocal volunteer activist, that was obvious. Caring and gentle, nurturing and patient. Right or not, I always kind of associate compassion with it, like you. And, Christ obviously is very compassionate. Whatever he does. I would just put that.
Trying not to make that bleed off. Okay. All right. And as I said to the group before, some people have tried to make a case that Christianity is a type 2 religion. As you can probably guess, I'm not a fan of thinking that way, right? It is too reductionistic, and don't even bother using the Enneagram if you're going to elevate one number above the others, because it defeats the purpose. But there's reasons for thinking that. And we all should strive to be helpers.
But that's more all or nothing thinking too.
Yeah.
Putting everything on.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And it probably wouldn't survive if it only had one set of traits.
Yeah. And the 2s don't want us all to be 2s. Dan's like, guys, mind your business. All right. 3s.
Obviously the three.
Obviously, I like this. We're really making a case. Leave it to the threes to make an actual case that Jesus is one of us.
It's because he was out there selling his mission, his vision to the people. From the Sermon on the Mount, where he attracted so many people to listen to his word, to healing people, to impress people of what was coming, the word of God. He was charismatic.
Right, miracles. Yeah.
Confident, humble. So he was a true
I don't know where humble comes into that.
It's in the book. It's in the first week.
Is that the free thing?
It is, we are humble role models.
Right.
Okay.
Very well.
Yeah, right, yeah. I think the three got to the end of the list of all our achievements and they're like, oh, shoot. Okay, humble. I'm also humble. It's on there, so you have to believe it. I am the humblest. All right. 4. We have a 4.
Okay.
I think we should pick this up and run with it, though. Jesus is a 4. I want you to be convinced.
Because he has deep emotional awareness.
Mm-hmm.
He's
I'm gonna say emo awareness.
He's non-conformist.
Mm-hmm.
Passionate.
I like how we have compassionate under 2, but we have passionate under 4.
Puts a lot of energy into relationships,
Mm-hmm.
like authentic connection.
Energy into relationships, huh? I'm cheating a little because I was at your table and you're not mentioning anything about his uniqueness.
I thought I did, non-conformist.
Nonconformist is how he interacts in the world, but he has that very unique sense of self that he is unlike everyone else. Because he was unlike everyone else.
There's add in on
Okay, fine.
Help me out.
He cut through the small talk to get to the deeper issues.
Do you know that, or maybe they just left the small talk out of the Gospels?
No, in the Gospel of John, in the first 5 chapters especially.
That's true. That's true.
Nicodemus, the woman at the well.
Forthright might be good, or yeah.
Did I say introspective? Deep.
Introspective, yeah. And I did read on, let's see. I thought there was a strong sense of spirituality. I might be thinking of 9s there. But, of course, 4s can definitely have a strong sense of spirituality. I can't remember if that's something they're specifically known for. But we have a nice list here. Thank you. Appreciate it, Laura. All right, now, if the 5s wanted to make a case for Jesus being a 5, they should have showed up, but they didn't. So, Vix.
Okay. 6s are loyal.
No.
Jesus was obviously very loyal.
Yes, loyal to.
His people, loyal to God,
Ah.
loyal to.
Okay.
So our table picked a different number for Jesus. So I'm
You picked 3, right?
It's a good communicator.
But Dan did that job beautifully. So you don't need to do Dan's job for him. Tell me why Jesus is a 6.
appreciates harmony
Mhm.
and group connection and building community. And even after his death, that was carried on in Acts, where they built that community up, being inspired by his life.
Yeah. And community building. And he just to show how good he was at it, he took the most unlikely people you could imagine to make a community out of them, right? Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Sixes.
I'm just gonna ask, maybe we shouldn't be surprised that the Son of God is all these things.
Yeah.
He's all these things.
And yet, so are we. We are all these numbers too, but it's we are more lopsided, more dominant in one area than others, and we are healthy in some ways and unhealthy in others. And the way that we've been raised to value this or value that, or just devalue this or devalue that, it's we all kind of find our way through fits and starts into that kind of breadth. And that's what you've been hearing me talk about especially the last 2 weeks, is finding our way across the circle, right? To finding ways to spread ourselves out without losing our sense of self. But I'm also not trying to make a case that, ta-da, Jesus is all 9 numbers. Because I think we would have guessed that from the beginning. But I'm definitely not trying to say that Jesus is equally all 9 numbers. I think if Jesus was indeed fully human, and Christian orthodoxy demands that of us, such as it is, then I think we have to be okay. Jesus was not both Jewish and Gentile. Jesus was not both male and female, right? Jesus was a particular person. So although he may have exhibited a more balanced range of the healthy characteristics of these 9 numbers, I think it's okay for him to have been more some numbers and less others, right? That's just a part of his particularity, and otherwise he wouldn't have been human. I don't know. That's just my take on it. So, okay, 7.
Okay, he was, I guess upbeat most of the time. And he was well liked among his peers, at least among the apostles. And huge crowds followed him, so people must have liked him. And it says always on the go. He had a mission, I think. And he knew what he was doing, and he was on the go. And it says curious sparkling eyes. I never saw him, so I don't know about the sparkling eyes.
The sparkling eyes. I've seen paintings. I mean,
Yeah, right, yeah. But he was, for the most part, I think he was upbeat.
yeah.
And it says childlike, I think, to a certain extent. So,
Absolutely.
So he was obviously.
Well, he told us we had to be childlike, didn't he?
Yes.
That's to become like one of these. In no way enter the kingdom of heaven. Right? Okay, 8. Wah, wah, wah. Sorry. Okay, 9.
No eights.
No 8s.
Well, Jesus is the Prince of Peace.
Of course. Yes.
Taught turn the other cheek.
Mm-hmm.
And as he confronted the established religion with which he did not agree, he was not a firebrand.
At least not at first.
Pardon?
At least not at first. He went. He pushed the limit towards the end, right? But no, you're right.
But instead gave us the Beatitudes.
Exactly.
The Sermon on the Mount. And connected deeply with his authentic self.
Mm.
That prayer and solitude were times of renewal. And we don't have a recording, but mellow and soothing voice. As we read through the Gospels, the way he comes into relationship with people, that have to be a soothing, warm, welcoming presence.
Especially hear that in some of the ways he talks to Simon Peter. Simon, Simon, and just, do you love me? And it's just so many tender moments. And some that are very much not, but you feel like his default mode was that kind of soothing, right? Yeah, and I feel like he did, I think you're right, even when he opposed the Pharisees. The famous moments of him opposing the Pharisees are when he's calling them out and yelling at them, right? But the majority of the gospel is, he's got them, he's eating dinner with them, He is confronting them gently or challenging them and communing with them. So we see him trying at every turn to make peace until finally he's like, you know what? That didn't work, so let me try this way instead. Yeah.
Jill and I came up with one more that was mediator.
Mediator, absolutely. Right, and that continues, right? Jesus as our mediator.
What we found interesting on the night was Abraham. Abraham being a mediator between deity and human.
Specifically Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right.
Yeah.
And bargaining with God. Let me try and find some more people that are good and we not destroy the city. Went and could never find anybody who was good. So, but he bargained with him.
Yeah.
How many times do you read about that? Even human bargaining, but I'm sure we bargain with God a lot.
Mm-hmm. Moses did it too. And Jesus did it too. Let this cup pass from me, if at all possible. Jesus had that real, that raw moment with the Father, saying, is this how it has to be? If it's how it has to be, then okay. But, it took that reckoning, right? Yeah. Any more from the 9 since we had 2 groups? Did that cover it? All right, well, we'll wrap up. But one thing I didn't get to mention last week as we were sitting around that circle is that one of the nicknames for that Enneagram shape is the face of God. And what better face of God do we have than Jesus? So on that note, I feel like we can look at the Enneagram, look at the circle, look at the connecting lines, look at the wings and all of that, and we can see the face of Christ since we don't have any photos, right? Represented in that kind of balance, and not that it has to be this absolute perfect balance, 100% of all 9 things, but that one human being above all other human beings in history has achieved this transcendent self-awareness and transcendent human awareness. And so to me, and that's the great thing, we're church people, and we get to look at the face of Christ every week, and hopefully more than once a week, right? And when we do, it is kind of like gazing into all of humanity. And I think that's what Jesus wants to be for us, wants to be that mirror to ourselves and to all of the people around us and say, hey, look, use me to make these connections, to understand yourself more by understanding the image of God as created in humanity. So, of course, if there's one overriding goal in Christianity, that is to become more like Christ. But I think some people react against this journey because they think of, well, Jesus was sinless and Jesus is perfect. And the more perfect you are, the more boring you are, the more kind of Jesus was barely even human, because how can you be sinless and human? How can you be perfect and human? All we know humanity to be is imperfect. So we lose our grasp on Jesus' humanity. But to me, it makes Jesus the most human out of all of us. And in that, I think we need to accept the particularities that come. I mean, Jesus probably had little foibles that we just don't know about. Just little quirks, and some of them we do, but we've just, it's just become part of the wallpaper to us because we've become so immersed in it. Jesus was weird, and we're all weird. And rather than seeing our journey to become more like Jesus, say we have to be more like this specific human, or even worse, we have to be more like some sort of robot that's so bland, that has no uniqueness, no interest, no special qualities to them. Instead, I think Jesus is asking us to learn how to reach across that circle and learn how to see the face of God in all of humanity, because we were indeed created in that image. Any final thoughts? Okay. Thanks, everyone. That's it.